Oh, how's it going out there today, YouTube? And a belated Happy Independence Day to those of you who are in the United States. As for those of you in the UK, that'd be Happy Treason Day for us. But anyway, regardless, in today's video, I'm going to be responding to Roaming Millennials' video, the problem with libertarians. Now, bear in mind, I have no issue with Roaming Millennial. I actually am one of her fans, and I do watch her on pretty much a consistent occasion. But I do tend to disagree with her in certain circumstances. It just happens to be one of those situations where I do. So if you don't mind, you can join hands with me as we merrily head down this pathway. But without further ado, let's jump into this, shall we?
Really identify myself as just being libertarian, or at least I try not to. And that's because A, the Libertarian Party in the US, yeah, it's pretty much a joke. I mean, they present lizard people like Gary Johnson for president, who in addition to not knowing what Aleppo was offended by the term illegal immigrant. Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, she's kind of got us on the whole Gary Johnson thing, but the way that the Libertarian Party works doesn't work exactly the same way as the Republicans or the Democratic Party. Where in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have the National Convention, which decides who isn't running for the nomination, and then inevitably who gets the nomination, and the president, whoever gets the presidential nomination, gets to choose whoever they want to be their vice president. Now, this happened during the previous election when Gary Johnson inevitably ended up getting the Libertarian nomination, but Austin Peterson himself was also in the running for it. And after Gary Johnson had gotten the Libertarian presidential nomination, it was quite possible that Austin Peterson could have himself had gotten the vice president nomination, because the vice president and the president nominee of the Libertarian Party are voted in by the party. It's not done by a convention, not done by a national convention. So Gary Johnson himself would have given up the presidential nomination if Austin Peterson had won the vice presidential. However, that did not happen, and we had Gary Johnson, unfortunately. But I've already touched on that before, which when I discuss Trump, it almost always comes up in conversation. But in regards to that, yeah, he doesn't like the concept of illegal aliens, because there are certain libertarians out there that do go so far as to want the abolition of borders. There are those kinds of libertarians. However, not all libertarians think that way. It's kind of an issue that people seem to have when it comes to the whole Libertarian Party, is they can't really. There are varying degrees of libertarian, but the best way that I describe it to people that aren't aware of the party or aren't affluent in it is that you start going from libertarian, and then you kind of go to minarchist, and then you have the anarcho-capitalists, which are the far spectrum of the Libertarian Party. They're like the Antifa, the left, or the alt-right of the right-wing party. They're still libertarians in the sense that they want small government, and in the case of anarcho-capitalists, they want the abolition of government almost entirely, if not entirely. But it's just one of those things that it's very difficult for people to understand, is that you can run into a libertarian that has a far different view of labor laws in pretty much a matter of days if you're seeking to talk to them. That's just one example, but I just wanted to bring that up because it'll come into play later with the next clip. But anyway, you'll see. Moving on.
Honestly, in my experience, they seem way more concerned with legalizing weed and prostitution than they do enforcing things like, I don't know, economic freedoms or Second Amendment rights. Like, we get it. You like pot. Maybe we talk about business regulations now. Just for a second.
Now, I don't know what kind of libertarians Roaming Millennial has been around in discussing these topics with. Maybe this is her experience with them. However, in my experience, most of them, like myself, are very pro Second Amendment. Very pro, yes, legalization of marijuana and prostitution, but we're not for the legalization of marijuana and prostitution because, oh yeah, well, we want to be able to smoke pot and have sex with prostitutes. We think that it's morally okay. No. And I want to play a little segment from a video from the channel called Freedom Tunes. And I think that will help to air out the dark, the messy air, so to speak.
Basically, a libertarian believes that as long as you aren't physically hurting or threatening someone, you're free to do whatever you want.
So wait, that must mean libertarians think things like drug abuse and prostitution are all completely okay.
Well, it depends. I mean, some of us do. You can believe prostitution or drug abuse are completely immoral, as I personally do, but the bottom line is, I don't think that the state is really capable of solving the problems associated with those kinds of things.
Wait, this is confusing. Isn't believing in the freedom to do something the same as condoning it?
Do you believe in freedom of speech?
Yeah.
Does that mean you condone every offensive thing that everyone's ever said?
Well, of course not.
Now, with that little tidbit out of the way, I feel like that more or less condensed my feelings towards the whole marijuana and drug abuse and prostitution thing fairly well. So to go into the whole business side of it and free market, most, if not all, libertarians, except with the odd libertarian socialism, I don't know how the fuck that works, but anyway, regardless, most, if not all, libertarians believe adamantly in the concept of the free market. And actually, we don't, in the concept of putting it in the terms enforcing the free market. And the free market shouldn't need to be enforced. It should be natural. It should occur naturally. If you are enforcing it, that implies that you are using the government to create the free market. And in case you aren't aware, which as you should be, roaming, is you're a very intelligent individual, the reason why the system is in the state that it is due to the government regulation. It's not that we think that marijuana and prostitution are top of our list of things that need to be fought for. It's just that, aside from the fact that the Libertarian Party is a mess in regards to what they actually, to pinpoint down what they actually believe, as I mentioned before, but it's not that those things are at the top of the list. That those things are still things that need to be taken care of. Those are situations where the state shouldn't be involved. Not because some of us libertarians believe that they are morally correct. It's just that some of us believe that the state isn't capable of handling it, or we just don't think that the government should get involved because they make a situation worse rather than better, which is usually the side that I fall on. But with that said, it's not a matter of, libertarians think this particular thing, and you got to be careful with the absolutes there. It's a very broad spectrum of people that you're really dealing with here. But anyway, moving on.
Libertarian movement now is just so lost when it comes to having a moral compass and the importance of civil society. And you guys can disagree with me about this if you want, and I do acknowledge that I'm generalizing here. But when I talk to libertarians, especially young libertarians, I find they spend so much time talking about things we can do that they never really question whether we should do those things. You see, there's a big difference in advocating libertarianism because you think the state should have limited control over the lives of individuals and corporations, and advocating libertarianism because you want to do whatever the heck you want. Drugs, hookers, it's all good. I want small government because I think the only legitimate function of the state is to protect the rights of its citizens. Simple enough. But I also understand that people are imperfect beings that need family, community, society, church in order to learn about and be encouraged to do what is right and what is good for themselves and the people around them. Humans aren't islands that exist isolated and independent of the choices of others. What you do affects other people whether you like it or not.
I mean, I'm aware of the kind of libertarians that she's talking about. Like I said before, and she mentioned that she recognizes the fact that she's talking about absolutes. And yes, I can see where she's coming from. However, she's taking a certain group of the Libertarian Party and basically saying, oh, well, since this group is bad, that means that the whole Libertarian Party is bad. And I could do the same thing with conservatives if I wanted to, for that matter. You have your radical and evangelicals, which actually would absolutely drive me nuts, which actually drove me away from the Conservative Party to begin with after I started my transition from being a liberal. But the same could be said for the mirror side of it when you have the liberals. You have your neo-Marxist, socialist, Burge communist types that are very radical in the way that they talk, and they want equality of outcome rather than equality in of itself. which they do exist. These people do exist, but I'm not saying that the right is indicative of the evangelicals. I'm saying that the left is indicative of the communist. You see, the thing is that I'm aware that those groups exist and that they're a small portion of the group. However, I do not say that the entire group is a joke or is morally bankrupt because of those two sides. Now, in regards to what you were saying about morality, you see, morality is a very subjective thing because what some person might find is morally acceptable, others may not. Some people might find the concept of prostitution morally acceptable, others may not. Some people might view marijuana or drug use as morally acceptable, others may not. So others may find the concept of preaching religion to your child as morally unacceptable. Am I one of those people? No, I'm just giving an example. So with that in mind, morality is subjective. Morality is based upon how you were conditioned as a child, how you grew up, your parents, your religion, your community. Which I'm well aware of the fact that you're part of a community in this as well. However, yes, some of my actions do affect the people that are around me. However, is me sitting in my basement loading my firearm, is that going to hurt anybody? No. No, that's the reason why we advocate for limited government, because there are plenty of arguments for more government that has been based off of this notion that there are certain actions that you do that are inherently bad. There are certain actions that people do that are inherently bad, like murder. Or mass shootings, like use for an example, a better example here. Some people, mass shootings are terrible. I will not argue with people on that. However, when they say, oh, well, because mass shootings are bad, what we should do is we should ban all firearms. It's the moral thing to do. That's where the argument starts to break down for you. It's not that these people want to be able to do it's not that certain libertarians want to be able to do things that they do. Like I said, I'm well aware of the young people that she's talking about. It's not that these people want to be able to do the things that they do just for the heck of doing them. They should be allowed to do them because the state being there and saying it's illegal and throwing them in prison for possessing 4 ounces of marijuana is fucking ridiculous. The state coming in and saying you can't have sex with a woman and pay her is ridiculous. As long as both parties are consensual and nobody is getting physically harmed, it's not an issue. Am I saying, like it was brought up in that tidbit that I wrote before, am I saying that I find it morally acceptable? No, but like I said, morality is subjective. We want less government. Less government is better for the people, is better for freedom. There's less chance that your freedoms are getting taken away at the end of a barrel of some government official. Am I saying that Roman Millennials advocating for larger government? Obviously, no. However, the way that she's worded certain things leaves her open for those criticisms. And that's exactly what the whole point of this video was, is to criticize her for the way that she spoke, the points that she brought up versus libertarianism. And yes, I'm well aware of the fact she had some self-awareness in this. She's like, I realize I'm speaking in absolutes. So at least she realizes that not every libertarian that is out there is exactly like those young libertarians that are actually sound more like anarchists than anything else. But with that being said, the concept that in order for people to grow up with morality, there has to be some form of governmental code involved. The social contract, I understand. Don't kill, don't steal, don't rape. Those kind of things are common sense laws that most people can agree with, certain cultures aside. But regardless, most people can be like, yeah, those things are bad. And there should be laws against those. You can't murder somebody, you can't shoplift, you can't, rape, obviously. But it's when people are like, well, you shouldn't really be able to drink until you're 21 because you're 18 and you're in high school and you got other people around you that are in high school. Meanwhile, you got people that are 18 and have friends that are over 21 that are buying beer all the time. It's not a question of what we should do because it's moral. It's a question of what we can do. Not because of morality, but because at what point do you start drawing the line of how far do you want to take the government? How far do you want to push morality? How far do you want government to enforce morality as you perceive it? Because if you continue to push the government to enforce morality as you perceive it, there's an opportunity for the opposite side to do the same to you if they ever were to come into power. You see this with the likes of the left and the right, especially, in both cases. But anyway, regardless, I've rambled on long enough. I will see you guys in the next video. I apologize for the tardiness as of late. I'm dealing with life stuff. I got warm. I got busy. Regardless, Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and or night, and I will see you in the next one, you glorious cunts.